Hey guys, welcome to Moore Honey Farm. My name is Jake Moore. I'm a second generation commercial beekeeper. Today I want to take you guys through the process of extracting honey. Now that's what we call the process of taking the box that we've already removed from the bees. We've removed the bees, now it's just a box full of honey, and how we get that honey out of the honeycomb and into a barrel to then be put in a bottle later on. Each of these boxes behind me are specifically only used for a time period called the honey flow. Now that is a point in the year where nectar is flowing heavily enough for bees to produce a surplus of honey and store it in these boxes. So as beekeepers, we know when that time is and we know how to observe for that time. So when we see the nectar start to flow, we add boxes and the bees store the honey in those boxes. We'll go higher and higher with the boxes until they're done producing honey. Now that time period here in Southeast Texas is only about 6 weeks that we produce honey for the remainder of the year. So each of these boxes is put on the beehive during the honey flow and then later removed once the bees have stored the surplus, stored in our warehouse, extracted, and then the empties are stored back in this warehouse for the following year. So the process starts here out of our warehouse. The full pallets of honey are brought to this station here where they're removed from the pallet and placed onto this conveyor manually where these boxes will enter the extraction room. So the boxes coming in the building are full of frames which are full of honey. This is capped honey that the bees have stored on this frame. So the next step in the process, these come in the room and they're inserted into what's called an uncapper. The uncapper automatically removes these from the box, and the frames go into the machine, and they go down the machine where the cappings on the honey are removed so that we can spin these later on to remove the honey. So the next step in the process, the frames that are dripping with honey now that have gone through the uncapper, ride up this conveyor here and go into this machine called the extractor. Now the extractor holds 120 frames, and as you'll see in a moment, when he starts it up, it takes those frames that are dripping with honey and starts to spin them super fast. All of the honey is thrown out of the frames and into the extracting system, and then the empty frames are pushed out the other end. The empty frames that are pushed out of the system are put right back in a bee box, and the bees will use those honey supers, those specific honey boxes, again the following year. So from the uncapper to the extractor, all of the honey that's dripping off of the frames or being spun off of the frames falls down into the vats that we have under the extraction system. These vats are connected and they eventually run to a pump that pumps the honey up and out of the room. And from there, it runs into the last step of the process, what's called our spinner. Now the honey that has been extracted, the honey that's fallen through the extracting system, is mixed together with wax. So it's honey and wax mixed together. We have to separate those two things in some way. This spinner does that process. But it's using centrifugal force to separate honey and wax. And so we get liquid honey out one end, clean liquid honey, and we get dry wax out the bottom. Now out of this machine, the clean liquid honey is pumped into a holding tank where we then fill up our 55-gallon barrels. So this is our hot room. The honey that is put in barrels makes its way into this hot room before we bottle the honey. Now the reason we do this is because honey naturally crystallizes and people like their honey liquid. And so we use a very minimal amount of heat in this room, as well as agitation to stir the honey, heat the honey, to make it liquid again because it will crystallize in our barrels. But that doesn't mean it's bad. So we'll go through this process, pump it out of the barrels into our filling tanks, and from there it makes its way to the bottle. This is the final stage of the process, the honey in the bottle. This is our filling machine. The honey that is pumped from the barrels of honey into the filling tanks then comes through the wall to our semi-automatic filling machine where we fill every single bottle of Moore honey.